Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Cup of News podcast with your hosts, Matt and myself, Peter. But first, a word from our sponsors, which is us, so a word from us. Make sure you guys check out cupofnurses.com. We keep our show notes there. We got the cupofnurses.com shop is also up. Some cool merch there, some cool shirts. We have frontlinewarriors.com as well. That's wearefrontlinewarriors.com. We have a lot of blog posts there, a lot of things about consciousness, meditation, wellness, how to be a more improved or better version of yourself through consciousness. Also, don't forget to check out our YouTube. We have almost 1.1K subs. Shout out to the 1080 that we have though. So it's cool. It's nice progress. We have the vlogs coming out every week on YouTube. And thank you for all your ratings and your reviews and likes on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. What's up, Matt?
I'm doing well, man. Thank you for the beautiful introduction. On today's episode, we're going to talk about the petrodollar, the history of oil, how it all starts, why prices fluctuate, amongst other things. Let's just get into hardcore facts about oil and, of course, our spin on it.
But real quick, we have a little bit of beer that we're going to drink because why not? And as a non-disclosure,
Let's crack it open.
We don't have any ties to oil barons. Matt and I are not oil barons. I don't have any blood lineage connected to the Rothschilds or Rockefellers that I know about.
No, me neither.
No Carnegies, maybe.
No Carnegies. No transportation of oil either. So I'm completely. Let's get it cracking here. We haven't drank a beer on the episode for quite some time.
Yeah, we should do another episode of how alcohol affects your body
And just drink like a 12
in Texas.
pack.
Yeah, except we should do some Texas moonshine. What do they drink in Texas?
I don't know.
No.
All I know is barbecue out there, bro.
Barbecue. We shall how barbecue affects your gut microbe.
Eat it for 30 days, make a documentary.
Did you know that?
Cheers, man.
Cheers. Did you know that all Scotch comes from Scotland?
It makes sense.
It's a type of whiskey, but all Scotch comes from Scotland. So you can only make Scotch in Scotland. It has to be made there. You can't make Scotch here.
Is that law?
That's law. You know how 2 Chainz says that law? That's law.
That's law.
That's law.
Wow, that makes sense because same thing with tequila, like the blue agave. I think a specific city in Mexico has the rights to only grow and distill and make that specific strain of tequila. I think that's a mezcal or something. Don't quote me on that one, but I like tequila.
Yeah, I'm not the big fan of any kind of alcohol. I don't know, dude. Like, I feel like alcohol was good when you're a certain age, and then when you hit another age, I think all alcohol tastes like shit. Except maybe like beer. Beer still, I haven't changed my mind about beer.
Yeah, I feel like growing up, it was a social pressure needing to drink because that's how we literally socialize as a culture. And more, I felt less pressure to need to drink and socialize. And then I didn't care for it at all, especially the way it makes you feel the next day.
Yeah, but a beer a day isn't that bad.
Nah.
I don't drink a beer a day though. I drink like, if you had to, you know how they asked you on admission how much glasses of wine or how much drinks you have a day or a year or whatever. Like probably, I don't know, like total wise, maybe like 30 a year. Seems legit, right?
Seems legit.
Because I'll probably go like 50.
I barely drank in California, and then in Chicago on our nurse break, we probably consumed the most amount I did all year. Because old friends, same habits in a sense. But it's fun. It doesn't hurt to socialize and have a beer. Cold one.
It's not a drug of choice. We prefer like meditation and deep breathing and caffeine.
It's not a drug, man. It's a lifestyle there. But yeah. So the petrodollar, I think it's interesting getting the history of how things started. Like big oil. We watched a documentary called How Big Oil Conquered the World. I highly recommend anyone to find that on YouTube. But the original version, because there's like versions on YouTube that are taken down. And basically John D. Rockefeller started Standard Oil and it monopolized the United States. But this also started in different countries. And just to go like a history back before we bounce into the petrodollar, there's bloodlines that were bidding on oil in specific countries, right? Like you have the Rockefellers, but then you have the Rothschild, but they were bankers originally. D. Rockefeller, his father discovered oil. Here you have big bank that went into oil. And for example, those are the British families. There was also the Deutsche Bank. There was also the German bloodlines that were into banking. And a crazy thing that blew my mind about this is, for example, when they discovered oil in Turkey, they were wanting to fight for the land for that country. So the Rothschilds, I think the Deutsche Bank had some access there first. So in order for them to get access, they literally hired like basically a public relations dude to go into Turkey, talk to the government, help them establish a central bank there. And while that happened, when they established the oil there, they got a percentage of it.
Right, but the thing is, what happened was, didn't they World War One start? So there was negotiations going on in Turkey to have the oil be run by people in like the not the Axis powers, but the Allied powers. You
Yeah.
could say before the war broke out. So they're negotiating to have a certain country have more power over oil versus Germany, and then the war broke out, which kind of solidified the deal that the Axis would kind of have that oil.
Yeah.
And it's crazy how before the war broke out, they were still trying to figure out who's going to get this oil, and they were fighting over it. And like when World War One happened, that's crazy. Archduke Franz Ferdinand got assassinated, right? World War One. Is that what happened?
Yep. And even if looking into prior to that, before like taking it back to United States, how Rockefeller, like the Supreme Court banned the monopolization of oil, there used to be a lot of electric transportation in different cities. But because of corporate greed, which would be Standard Oil and him, they kept buying and monopolizing off things. Like what was the one thing where they had like electric buses and they got rid of that through deals and they instead renovated those electric cars and just made buses to run on petroleum just to boost their profits.
Right. So these guys would literally, they wouldn't outperform the competition. They would destroy the competition. Like Matt was saying with the railroad cars, so it was run by electricity, and these guys wanted oil to be more powerful and used as a necessity compared to electricity. So literally, what they did was they bought out the land that the government owed and said, "Hey, we're gonna do the transportation over here, but we're gonna do it our way." And the government said, "Yeah, fine, do it, and you can pay for it." So they basically then they ripped out all the electric railways, and they put basically gas powered buses, which is crazy how you could do that when you have that much money.
Yeah.
You really don't have to worry about the competition because you could just literally not even allow this competition to be exposed to people. Because back then electricity wasn't really a big known thing. It was more of the oil powered car, the gas powered car. Right? Nobody was doing electricity. There was small groups of people that were trying to create these electric powered vehicles, but majority of the wealth and the money was in the hands of these people that owned oil. So obviously you're going to want to push a product that runs on your product,
Exactly.
because that's like a genius approach to it.
And this is why people don't see the modern day dilemma when corporations are doing things to influence specific things in our society and blaming it on another event that's happening in the world. Apply that to whatever you want, but this has been happening throughout history. And you mentioned that we talk about examples. Another example is like the Prohibition from 1920 to 1933, I believe. So the Model T cars were running on oil, but also they found that alcohol is a better energy source for cars to run on. It was cheaper than the Standard Oil per barrel, and it was better for the environment. Standard Oil, John D. Rockefeller, he noticed the competition. What do? You buy them out. So in order to do that and prohibit the use of alcohol in cars, he blamed it and needed an excuse to do something on a national level. Americans were big drinkers back then, a lot more than now. So what he said is he bought out some, I don't know what the story goes, politicians, whatever power you have to buy out in the United States to basically say we need to stop Americans drinking alcohol because it's bad for their health. That's wild. So for 13 years you couldn't buy, sell, produce, transport, or anything for alcohol.
So you couldn't even create anything with it. So back then, when you had these alcohols that would power these engines, you had the alcohol engine and basically the oil or the gasoline engine. And now, if you bring a prohibition and you can't access alcohol, how are you going to create cars that run on alcohol? You can't. It's impossible because it's going to be too hard for you to get the product that they run on. So that's another great example of how Rockefeller was able to destroy competition instead of outperforming it.
Yeah, and another like great example using him. I mean, the guy's smart as hell. You got to give it to him, dude. Is like the how media influences things. So he was such a rich man. He was a $1 billion man versus the average American only made $525 a year. So this guy was walking around and people would cry to him and do all these negative things because they knew how rich he was because he was just giving out money. And they also had a bad image, I believe, about him. So he hired, and he knew the power of influence, public relations to record specific stories of him doing good deeds, like giving 10 cents to poor people, and they would post this on the media and things like that in the paper to create a better persona image of him.
Yeah. Well, what's even crazy what he did is that the Rockefellers, they were the ones that created the anti-Rockefeller like foundation people. So they actually benefited off the haters too, because they ran that organization too. So all of the donations that people would give to like the anti-Rockefeller organizations and anti-Rockefeller people, technically they were giving it back to Rockefeller because he was
party.
because he was one running the opposition too, which is insane. So he had himself and his team and also the competition. He played on both sides, which is how wild that is. It just shows you how much money this guy had, that he could afford to make a business out of people hating on him. That's crazy. Smart guy.
And that's why when you look at like real world events, this is why you look at the bigger picture and see what's happening, the influences, the money being spent somewhere, because that all matters, because that shit was happening for decades, centuries, kings, freaking war. I mean, that's how people survive, man.
Right. Yeah. So bringing it back to petrodollar. So for those of you that don't know, our United States currency, it's considered fiat currency, which is a currency not backed by anything. Back, I want to say before World War II or something around the area. We'll get into dates and specifications in a little bit. There was one point in time where all money was backed by gold. So, for example, you go somewhere and you could give an X amount of dollars and they'll give you gold for it. It was an equal exchange. But now that doesn't exist anymore. So everything is basically not really backed by anything tangible, you could say. So what the petrodollar is or how it relates.
Like a crypto, man.
Right. So what the petrodollar is and how it relates. The quick rundown is basically a petrodollar was created during the oil boom, and it was used as a way to purchase oil. But the thing is, it was that all oil had to be purchased with the U.S. dollar, which means wherever you were in a country, you basically needed U.S. dollars to buy oil, and that's also if you sold oil, you would get the money back in U.S. dollars. So if you wanted to buy oil, you had to have USD. And if you wanted to sell oil, you would get USD.
This is why we have been so dominant.
Yeah, it's exactly why we've been so dominant in the world and why we still currently are so dominant. So what happened, kind of just to give you a little background, is post World War I, Europe was completely destroyed. Number one country that came to rise was the United States because we didn't have a war-torn country. Manufacturing was booming, industrial revolution and all that was peaking, and everything was going good for us and very well, which also made our currency be very valuable, because with war usually comes inflation. So all these European countries that had the pound, the whatever the Germans had, the French, before the euro came to be in existence and stuff, they each had their own currencies, but that was worth less than a dollar because the U.S. had the better economy. If you wanted to succeed in life or have better opportunity, people usually immigrated into the United States.
And we're a perfect example of that because our family thought the same way, and that's why Peter and I are here as immigrants we're first generation.
Right. And another crazy thing about it is, since the U.S. dollar was so powerful and U.S. wasn't war-stricken, we also had the most amount of gold. And basically, there was more currency in Europe than there was gold to provide for that. So what happened was, in 1944, there was a conference with about 44 countries, including the United States, and where they discussed, hey, what are we going to do with this money? Because we just had World War I, we have a bunch of currencies, and we can't back everything by gold. Like, which ones should we make more important? Which ones should we make less important? What should be like a standard? So then the U.S. proposed that the currencies be hedged by the dollar, and the dollar is going to be backed by gold. So all these 44 countries, their currencies were basically backed by the dollar, and then the dollar would only be backed by gold.
Which creates
which kind of has the same idea.
Monopoly in a sense.
Right.
Yeah.
Which basically creates monopoly, because if you want to get gold for your French money or for your English money, you first had to exchange it for the US dollar. And then after you had the US dollar, you were able to exchange it for the gold. So basically, It was a currency backing multiple currencies that was backed by gold.
And this all started taking a pivotal shift when we went to war with Vietnam. Mm-hmm. So in 1971, during that era when we've been in Vietnam for a few years.
Real quick, Vietnam, which is interesting because Vietnam was the first war ever in history that was all done on a loan. So we never paid for the Vietnam War. It was all financed.
Damn.
Isn't that crazy? And that's what happens. That's what happened that you're going to talk about in a little bit.
Yeah. When did I wonder when the Federal Reserve took place, because that created the monetary system for America to continuously keep taking these financial loans out for things.
I'm guessing the Federal Reserve would have to. We should probably look that up. But I'm guessing the Federal Reserve would have to come into existence after these 44 countries probably met, because then doesn't the Federal Reserve print the money, right? For the
Yeah.
U.S. But then when U.S. dollar would be established,
1913, bro.
yeah. So now I'm thinking for the U.S. dollar to be established, the Federal Reserve would also have to be established because they're the ones that were always printing it.
Yeah.
So it has to be before World War One, which you said is 1913, which makes sense.
And basically the Federal Reserve is just a monetary system it's a central bank in America.
That regulates the U.S. dollars. So they're the ones that print money, burn money, give you money, take away your money.
Yeah, it's such an illusion. It's mind blowing when you get into the history. So, what Peter mentioned is our war was funded by debt.
Yeah.
Long story short, so Nixon in 1971 announced that, hey, we don't have the USD backed up by gold anymore, and that basically skyrocketed the price of oil because the dollar devalued. There was no backing by gold, so the price of oil per barrel went up from $2 to $12. Just imagine that kind of inflation taking place all within that time.
Right. So what happened was Nixon and the whole party that was pro the Vietnam War, they financed this war, and what happens with financing is there was not enough gold to back it up. So we had to leave this gold standard of $1 for the gold, because you could say we over leveraged how much money we thought was going to be brought back for Vietnam, you could say. And that's when Nixon had to make a decision whether, hey, what are we gonna do with this US dollar, because there's X amount of dollars, but we only have X amount of gold. I think there was like three times more US dollars than there was gold available. And so countries started to realize that, hey, this is happening, so they started coming to U.S. and asking for their gold back. So they were giving away their U.S. dollars for the gold. So Nixon was like, "Shit, there's not enough gold for all these U.S. dollars that are in the system. What do we do?" Because these countries keep asking for the gold for this U.S. dollar. We're not going to be able to give everybody this U.S. dollar because they fucked up because of the Vietnam War.
Yeah, we got an idea.
Yeah, we got fucked because when you take stuff on a loan, you're expected to pay back with interest, right? And interest got so high where it ended up being 3 times more than what we had.
And this is where the petrodollar was created. So we figured out an idea to make our money, or make the USD dollar be valuable by being backed up by oil. So oil was the currency of the USD, and they have an interconnected relationship now ever since then.
Right.
And
So Nixon sent Henry Kissinger to Saudi Arabia to kind of bring forth this idea where these oil producing countries are only going to be able to sell their oil, and you can only buy oil with the US dollar, which is insane, because that makes the US dollar very reliable on oil, and oil also reliable on the US dollar. It's going to cause price fluctuations. But this is insane how you could go into a country, send like a diplomat or somebody that's good at conversing or making deals like Henry Kissinger was. I'm pretty sure he was a bankster, right?
Bankster, he was an old German Jew that escaped, right, during the Hitler time in World War II. And he was he was a not the treasury secretary.
He was a Treasury Secretary of the United States.
Okay.
Yeah.
And a national security advisor. High value man.
Yeah, so they basically sent him to make this deal. So what happened was, what Matt was saying, that since countries started realizing, hey, this US dollar isn't actually backed by gold, so it's not really as valuable as we thought, people weren't really interested in it anymore. So, like Matt said, the oil prices shot up. For example, it went from $2 to $12. That just shows you that there was a drop in demand of US dollars. So the US dollar wasn't as valuable. That's why there's inflation and the prices skyrocketed. Because if the US dollar isn't strong anymore and can't buy you as much as it used to, then obviously countries are going to charge more for their products.
And a good perspective is that every single country has some kind of oil-based petroleum vehicle. And now every single country needs to have USD to buy this damn oil for the whole entire country's cars, trucks, transportation, you name it. This is where value was restored in the USD. And if, did you mention that in exchange, Saudi Arabia got military protection? So yeah, we protect Saudi Arabia, as the military. So whatever conflict potentially Saudi Arabia had with Iraq and all that, you never know what kind of influence that had. Maybe we had to go into war.
Yeah.
What if I don't know the history, but now we're speculating here just so you guys know. What if that Saddam Hussein was trying to do something and have a direct impact on the petrodollar? So we instead had to, it was basically 9/11 was funded by Saudi Arabia by a bunch of terrorists. That's been the conspiracy, right? We don't know. But if you look into the history of oil and how corrupt it is and what happens in the backdoor plays, you see how this shit could make sense.
Yeah, exactly. And you don't really hear about this. Where do you learn about this? You don't really learn about this kind of stuff in school. You don't. You kind of have to scour the web and just find out the connections yourself. And this is how it works, because people are billionaires or trillionaires. They have so much money that they don't really care about the money anymore. They prefer to like leverage power. So obviously, if you already could buy whatever you want, what's the next thing? Like, you're going to probably want to have more land.
Yeah.
And then that usually comes up with like diplomacy and taking other countries. That's something that's always been going on since the existence of like humans and time. Always battle for land, right? People always fought for land all the time. The barbarians, the medieval times was always about land. Middle East was always about land. Yeah, same way when Columbus traveled the ocean blue and came to the United States, right? The Western Hemisphere, the U.S., it's always about land, about domination.
Yeah, because, hey, who the hell funded them? Kings. What did that king want? Territory.
Yeah, because it's something, because if you don't realize, land is like almost like gold. It's not gonna. There's a limit of it. That's why it's so valuable, because it's not everybody could have it. It's so limited. Because if you have all the land, that's all the land there is. No one else can have any more land if you already have all the land.
Yeah.
And as humans, we like these things.
Yeah.
Isn't that crazy?
And now that all the land is almost consumed, data is the new thing that we're mining, and it's the gold. And also a crazy thing is, who knows how 9/11 happened and stuff, but there was definitely a lot of influence for us to go there, especially that video when the diplomat guy, he meets like the national secretary, and there's a plan how we're going to go into 6 different countries in the next like decade. And that's the shit that was going down: Syria, Somalia, Afghanistan, Iraq, you name it. What's the other one? Yemen.
Do you remember a few months ago where they had that reporter that was killed? Was that in Saudi Arabia?
So there was a documentary on that one, the Prince one.
Right.
I don't know. We always talk about the Russian one, the whole election rigging.
Well, was that in Saudi Arabia where that person died, like in the embassy where they killed him?
It was the prince from one of the princes from Saudi Arabia, but it was the Saudi Arabian embassy in Turkey.
Yeah.
Where he got killed. Yes.
See, and that's probably why we didn't really dig in too deep into that, because guess what? Saudi Arabia, we got a good handshake with Saudi Arabia back from these 1944 days.
Yeah, dude. Why do you think Trump couldn't say shit when the freaking prince assassinated? Everyone knows about it. Same thing with Putin. These people cannot be touched in a sense.
You can't.
And another perfect example of how corrupt this shit is too is, it's interesting because we have a nursing podcast, and here we're just hammering the history, but people need to be educated because knowledge is power. Yeah. So look at Gaddafi, which is around 2006 to 2008, whenever Obama took office. Gaddafi was actually a man that wanted to sell oil, another country that has a lot of oil. He wanted to sell oil in a different currency, not by the USD. So America knew, because of Libya, the resources, whatever connections he had, he was clearly a threat to the economy of the United States because of the petrodollar. So what we did is we created a bunch of propaganda around Gaddafi. He's a bad dictator. He's doing this. Do you remember we created a no-fly zone over his country and all this shit? And then all of a sudden, Obama just declared war and just shot a bunch of Tomahawk missiles and killed him in his bunker.
Yeah.
Well, and we were all cheering that on because on the news we're hearing he's a bad dictator. He's killing people. I'm sure he wasn't the best man. I'm not freaking defending him. But what we did was freaking really unlawful, technically illegal, whatever you want to call it. But
it's one of those things that you don't know for sure.
You don't know for sure.
That's one of those things where it's it's always if you want to try to hit one person, just because why? You're telling me that if we just kill this one person, this whole organization is going to disappear?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Why do we, when you're talking about Libya and us bombing them, why do we got to bomb people so hard?
Right. I mean, there's
for what
also the
reason?
industrial military complex. There's multiple people that are benefiting from this that we have to
100%.
look at.
That's why it's like a you can't always blame one person. It's like the systems that's the issue that's been in place.
Yeah,
not
it's
necessarily
like
the people.
it's like looking at Afghanistan, right? I think the previous episode we mentioned Afghanistan recently, and that was recorded a little bit later. Now we're looking a couple weeks back in. You know, there's a bombing in Kabul by another ISIS terrorist group now. Now they're saying we cannot restore peace in Afghanistan because the Taliban cannot withstand this terrorist group if America doesn't get involved or the Afghanistan security forces. So now we created this crazy scenario on the mainstream news narrative that people and children are dying and all that. And I believe that. I'm not saying it's wrong, but now what are we doing? Now it's just another narrative to go back to war. The industrial military complex is going to be happy. News ratings go up. Yeah. I mean, there's just a bunch of things that we don't know about how there's benefits from corporations. And what, another decade of war. Now we're fighting, and now we're helping the Taliban all of a sudden. I don't understand.
Right. And it doesn't take a lot to cause or start a war.
Oh no.
Because I'm thinking about it right now. Like you could fly somebody in. Let's say, for example, you can fly somebody in here if you want to start a war with the U.S. I can fly somebody here from, let's say, like Ukraine or France or any country. Fly him here. He can make a bomb for me. I can take this bomb and I can walk down a few blocks at a school and blow that shit up.
Careful what you say, dude.
I'm not gonna do this.
There you go. Perfect.
I'm just giving for an example. Like it's not that hard to fly somebody in here, have a create a bomb for you, and you walk somewhere down and cause an explosion that kills like 15, 20 people, and then have the media all come at once, all report on it, and you give them that information that they want. So hey, this was done by somebody from Bangladesh. This is a Bangladesh against the U.S. bombing, and you could hype it up and you can make it huge, and think it's, oh my God, this is Bangladesh is starting war with the United States, and you could stir that shit up, and you could cause the U.S. population to turn on Bangladesh, even though that bomb went out, but it had anything to do with Bangladesh.
I mean,
or how almost like minute that bomb was compared to other crazy shits going on in the world, like starvation and like genocide and all those crazy things.
Right. The CIA has a track record of doing things like that. They fund specific protests and different activities in different countries in order to influence things to go a specific way. Like this shit is not a conspiracy. It's open source.
We're not saying that this stuff is done all the time. We're saying that companies will take advantage of a situation no matter what it is, no matter if they did it or if somebody else did it. Like even one of the crazy investors always says, don't be afraid to take advantage of a good crisis because you could profit from it. Look at how many people profited from the COVID-19 pandemic. Look at all these companies. We're not saying that's bad, but sometimes people value profit over really anything else.
Over our freedoms, liberties,
Sometimes that profit does come with a positive side, but there's also times where that profit comes with a detrimental negative side. You have to be able to differentiate that yourself. And that's kind of, when we tie censorship into our episode, when we talk about censorship, that's why it's so important, because nobody should be telling you which way you should think or which side to choose. Right. You should be making that own decision, because us as humans, we naturally know right from wrong. Right. Like, for example, if you never heard of the Nazis and somebody presented to you, hey, there was a group of people called Nazis trying to exterminate people called Jews, would you be on Nazi side or a Jewish people side? Naturally, instinctively, you would vouch for people that were Jews because they were getting killed, right? There's something in us that's, for most people, is going to choose the benefit, the more positive outcome. But when you're censored, you don't always get a full picture on both sides. Yeah. And so people are able to kind of push you towards one of the choices for their benefit. So that's why censorship is, I believe there should not be any kind of censorship. Or I guess I would say like pedophilia, those kind of things. Like you shouldn't be able to see people. You shouldn't see people
ethical shit.
Yes.
And I'm backing you up, because for anybody listening, ask yourself this question. Do you want to have a distorted reality? A sanitized reality? Why don't you have the freedom to choose what you take in? Not your government to take in a distorted reality for your safety. They use that shit way too much. And to give you a good example, I don't want to lose my train of thought.
Can I say something real quick?
Run it.
So if it's hard for you to put yourself in that kind of a mindset, think about this. So, for example, you have kids, right? Think about your kids' future. So, you have your kids. Do you believe someone else should have more of a saying on what your kids believe, what they should see, what they should look at, what they should learn? Or do you think you should be the one that should be telling your kids what to do, what to look, what to look at, what to see?
That's like, yeah. How do you want to raise your kids, or do you want the state to run your kids?
Exactly.
And the Constitution says that we are the American people. We have these sovereign liberties given to us by God, and we're meant to govern ourselves. Sovereignty, not the government governing us. That's the exact opposite of what our founding fathers have told us to do, and we're falling into a crazy pitfall. So, yeah, like, geez, see, we're supposed to talk about the petrodollar here, but looking at like COVID and all these corporations that I mentioned, like this week, like you have all these companies at Google and Microsoft are investing to that are going to be doing COVID screenings, at home services. Now they're going to track employees, and if you get 6 feet close, they could vibrate. All these different corporations that are creating the next future businesses, if they make $100 million a year, and now you're going to be monitored actively when you go outside because it's for your safety. Do you think these corporations are going to want to let go of these grips?
They're not.
If Microsoft owns those companies, they might pay a couple politicians a couple more $1 million just to make sure that this never gets turned back, which is like that, just like the Patriot Act happened during 9/11, the COVID contact tracing. Contact tracing is legally now we could track us, right? If we're not going to overturn that, especially when there's companies making money. So you see that? Yes, I understand we should get all these great things and do all these proper things because we want to benefit the greater good of society. That's altruism. But we also have to look at the negative consequences that are never going to be reversed when it comes to our freedoms and civil liberties. Yeah, that's it.
Yep.
That's all I have there.
There you go. Respect. Especially once you started getting in the economy, like we were just talking about Proposition, 21 or 22 or 12?
Yeah, in California.
So think about it. So they wanted to, I don't know the full story. I didn't dig real deep, but just from like a theoretical and like a concept kind of look at it. So there was this proposition that said, should Uber driver and Lyft drivers be considered employees? And Uber and Lyft and those kind of companies were against it because they knew that if, or I don't know if they didn't know or they did know, but I'll just go in this route. So Uber and Lyft knew that if they were considered employees, they had to offer them benefits, different kind of perks because they're employees compared to where they are like outsourced. What is it called?
Like you're almost like
Contractors.
freelance. You're independent contractor.
You're like an independent contractor, so you don't qualify for the same benefits and perks as employees do. So obviously Uber and Lyft were fighting against it, but you gotta understand that what if Uber and Lyft couldn't afford to call them employees because they would have to pay them, so they ultimately go bankrupt. That's the thing. So you have to be careful because once these things that you thought are beneficial in the long run they're negative, once they're instilled in the economy, it's kind of hard to let them go.
Yep.
Because even though if you think Uber and Lyft are treating their employees like carelessly and improperly, well, guess what? Is it better for them to not have a job, or is it better for them to have a job but be treated carelessly and improperly?
Right. And it's like, look, and that's a perfect example to relate to us. Imagine if we had assistants and if they work 20 hours, we can't just send them a regular W form. Hey, you're an independent contractor. Now they need benefits and all this.
Right.
So now you're starving the little people that are in the entrepreneur space are trying to make it because now everybody needs benefits, and that's going to crush your business, and you could potentially never become successful. More benefit for corporations.
That's why it's important to have the ability to look at things from all perspectives, because the short-term benefit might not be the same as the long-term benefit. So you have to be able to like value that and see if you're willing to risk that and if it's going to be beneficial for you. Think about like almost like in school. Now that I'm thinking about these like different theories, think about school like college education. What I agree with education is in school you should be taught like the core curriculum, like math, certain sciences, certain histories, something that we could all agree on. That's what I believe that everybody should be taught at school. Someone that's intrinsically almost good. Like math we can always agree on. 2 + 2 is 4, right? That should be taught at school. But more of like the moral things and values and more of these ethical things, I don't think those should always be in the core curriculum because all that's subjective. I think school does well in making elective courses where you're required to take something like math, science, history, but then you also have a choice to take something more as elective, like let's say certain psychology classes, or maybe cooking class, or maybe band class, or something like that. That's what school does a very good job on. And I don't think school should ever try to push opinionated things or polarized things or very subjective things on students, which I feel like is going on a lot in universities now, where they're trying to push certain ideas and concepts onto people that are more subjective than objective.
Yeah, so remember how I was mentioning the self-identity? They kind of want us to keep identifying with things. And that's like a bad school of thought.
And it becomes, and it leaves the elective side, right? That's like an elective thing. It's not something that really everybody needs to survive, right? In math, you need to survive like this, like courses on like gender identity, things like that. Those you could get away with in life and not ever look at, and you'll be completely fine as a human being. When they start pushing those kind of things, those kind of ideas, I'm not saying that's bad. I'm saying more ideas that are very subjective, and you should think this way, but it's subjective. That doesn't really have one objective approach. That's when I think it's bad, because that's when it kills creativity and makes you conform to just one idea. And you can't, like, I'm gonna say this again. I think I always say it, is that you can't grow if you just have the one idea.
Exactly.
Because there's perspectives. Exactly. Because you might think it's a good idea for the short term, but that long term might come and bite you in the ass.
Yeah. Even if people like listen to us and they're like, wow, we were raised so diversely and all this, this formulates different opinion. And maybe that's why we have such different interests and bring such great ideas into discussion, because we were just raised and understand different aspects of society.
And plus, like, if you think about it, we were a lot less censored than normal. I don't want to say normal kids, but other kids, because our parents only spoke Polish, so they relied on us through English translations.
Yeah, I got away with everything, guys.
Yes. There was no censorship for us. Internet, we found out about first. You could look up whatever the fuck you wanted at any age, because your parents aren't gonna block anything from you. You could see whatever.
So they told me at first, like, Matt, like, we get bills what you send. So it scared me for like the first month or two, and then you're sneaky enough.
Started calling and paying for the bills. You realize, hey, this bill statement doesn't say anything about it.
Exactly. So our parents relied everything for us to set up. Yeah. So it's like I probably called Comcast to set up the appointment. I got the accounts ready, so I already had access. My parents can't like put parental control on me because I had no idea about that.
Yeah.
No curfew. Geez, if I miss school, it's probably my phone number they're calling, and my friend is telling me like, I'm sorry, my kid is sick.
Yeah,
it is what it is. That's a child that I was growing up, but it freaking matured me like a mother.
And we grew up in the age of internet, so we had no web access restrictions at all. So we could look into whatever. If our parents told us, and then Google came along.
Yeah,
because Google was like, hey, or ask Jeeves. Hey, ask Jeeves. What is this? What is that? And your parents would tell you something like, hey, this is this, and you'd be like, what is this? And you Google it. You fact check your parents already at such a young age without even knowing it, because the internet was already programming you to, instead of looking at a book. Not question and looking at a book, they simplified it. They got rid of the friction. Yeah. Instead of asking a book, it's you just type it in here and we'll give you the information. That's already almost like that's the first step to freedom, but it's also the first step to censorship. Because if you make it very easy for me where I could ask a question in this little text box and you spit out the answer for me, well, guess what? I'm asking a question and you're the one spitting out this answer for me. You're the one spitting it out.
So now you're getting a diluted sense of information.
Yeah, it's not you going into books and reading what it is. It's telling you what it is. You're not going to dictionary and saying, what does fart mean? It's, hey, what is fart? And it's Google telling you what that means. You could be fucking wrong.
So it's almost like as fast as we got into this situation, which is the freaking eliminating the friction and the currency of time and being so quick about finding everything.
And freedom of knowledge.
Yeah, we also have to almost bounce back and look at books and information because of the history that it has, and it doesn't dilute your sense of information the way you learn and all that.
The same day as the internet allowed the spread of knowledge and ideas, it took it away. Because it became the one main area of where it's going to be. And it's crazy because the internet technically is free. Things. Think about it. Internet isn't really centralized, you could say, but technically it is centralized because someone could shut that bitch off.
Well, now it's becoming centralized because now we're realizing these big entities that are just in control of a few things, like Facebook and Google basically control everything right now. Yeah. Not including Amazon delivery, like Facebook and Google. From a social aspect, yeah. From a social aspect, they have us in the freaking loop. Mm-hmm. Whatever algorithms they're feeding us through the various social platforms, they got it all down to a T. So then if you hear that YouTube removes 1 million videos of misinformation, you could look at it two ways. You could either cheer that on because it could be helping the public, but what really is misinformation when you have pharmaceutical industries that are not going to want to basically look into what's that one drug? Not Questrin.
Oxycodone? Which one? The one that was
The
what was it for?
not remdesivir. It helped with COVID.
Ivermectin?
Ivermectin. Now you're gonna have misinformation about ivermectin instead of getting a shot or whatever it is, a specific treatment that there's a patent that makes a lot of money because it's gonna benefit big pharma. And then you have this skewed sense of reality, what's right, what's wrong, but they create the divide and conquer, and you have to identify with a side, and they continue to win. And at the end of the day is what
You know what's mind blowing? Like,
this beer is freaking good, by
Yeah,
the way,
yeah,
man. It got me thinking, huh?
that's what I'm saying. Internet was supposed to be a tool, but now it's like a necessity. So for example, you know how crazy it is? Like, for example, if I ask you a question and I'm not sure, or for example, if you tell me something, I'm gonna look it up right away. Because many people they would rather believe what Google tells them than what they learn from a person.
That's also
Isn't that
deep,
crazy?
too.
You learn a disconnect.
Yeah.
Because back in the day, learning was from peer to peer, person to person. Now, people value what Google tells them over what a person tells them, which is crazy. Which is
You almost have
double-edged
like
sword.
your ego almost kicks in at that point,
Yeah.
and you almost want to challenge everybody's thoughts instead
Right.
of actively listening to where they're coming from.
So that's the thing. It's a tool. We can't forget that it's a tool. It's not a necessity. It's there for us to use, but we have to use it in the right manner. Because if a tool we could use a right way and a wrong way, right? A hammer. If I'm using a hammer to hit a nail into the drywall, it's good. But if I'm funking somebody up in the forehead, dude, and killing them, that's not the right way we use a hammer. It's a tool, right?
Yeah.
It's the same way. That's the same way how everything. It's the same way the cell phones work. It could be, it could give you the most success, but it could be the end to your demise, or it could be the end to your demise, but it could also be your demise.
Yep. Same thing with social media.
Yeah.
You either are consuming or creating.
Yeah.
In all essence, and are you using social media as a great tool to learn?
Yeah, and that's why I like when people say like it's a battle for your mind, because these are all tools, and everything is mentally driven, and it's all with the conscious and the subconscious, where most of the things that we do require mental effort, mental thought, where that's what people are fighting for now is what goes in your mind and what you think about.
Yeah. So this cell phone is almost becoming your own prison. We're almost putting ourselves in a
Yeah.
box for a minute. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
At least that's where my thoughts are coming from.
Yeah, well, back to how much gas costs, I guess, right?
Yeah.
Real quick, we'll sum it up. Gas prices are constituted by the cost of crude oil, the taxes that are put on it, and then all the marketing and promotion that goes along with it. And it's crazy, man. I learned this a little bit ago. Is that everything that goes into gasoline, you're paying for everything. So that is from the time the oil leaves the earth up until it hits your gas tank. We're all paying for that. Everything, every single thing, every single cost gets passed on to the consumer.
Accounted for.
Yes, and you could do that with these things that are necessities nowadays. Even water, like the cost of water is all passed down to the consumer. Even the branding, but of course, like Coca-Cola makes the water, so they obviously have a different kind of branding strategy and stuff. But things that are necessary in life that people almost cannot live without, those costs are usually always passed on to the consumer. This is crazy to think about.
It is. And if you're wondering what are the 5 top imports of crude oil in the United States, Canada's number 1 being 52%. Then we have Mexico with 11%. 3 is Russia with 7%. Saudi Arabia 7%. I wonder why now. And Colombia is 4%. So that's what's disclosed to us. Who knows where all it comes from?
Right.
Sum it up.
Yeah. I was gonna say one more thing about the crew, but I forgot. I don't know. I don't think I have anything, I guess.
Okay, I think we had an awesome episode here. We dive off topic, but I think our shows are freaking damn amazing because we never cut a single damn thing. Everything always runs raw, unfiltered. If we have to pause and think, we do. A lot of people edit their shows and make it pretty. Like, this is the reality of Couple Nurses here. We're raw and unfiltered. And I hope you learned a lot about the reality of crude oil, the influence of power, how big corporations could have a lot of influence on the world, and just be always open to DYR, doing your own research, and stay open-minded in this world of one-mindedness.
Yep, thank you so much. Don't forget to check out the shops, guys. See you.
Peace.